Hey, Chantel.
Hi,
It is good to see you.
same here. Excited to be here.
Um, I'll give a little introduction of what I've got prepared to introduce you. Uh,
Great.
Chantel Robeaux is a cybersecurity professional specializing in cybersecurity compliance, risk management, and helping organizations navigate today's evolving regulatory landscape. At Summit 7, she works with organizations across the defense industrial base to strengthen their security posture and prepare for compliance frameworks such as CMMC, translating complex requirements into practical, achievable strategies. A passionate advocate for continuous learning and career development, Chantel is active member of the cybersecurity community and frequent conference speaker. She enjoys sharing her unique journey into cybersecurity while empowering others to pursue careers in the field through education, mentorship, and practical guidance. Chantel is a woman after my own heart. In that way, we have a lot um, in common, and very excited to hear your talk today. Um, Chantel, I've got questions about your take on the latest things around CMMC from DOW. If there's time at the end, I'll see if we can chat. Otherwise, I'll hit you up later. But
Absolutely.
uh, is there things about you that I missed that you would like to let the folks know?
No, that kind of wraps it up. You'll hear
Um,
more obviously in my presentation, so there'll be more details.
Excellent, excellent. Um, I want to say up front, thank you for joining us with CyberLab Con. We appreciate you providing your wisdom and your presence for our audience and for our mission. Um, and we really appreciate you taking the time today to be part of this.
Well, I appreciate Brianna reaching out to me and to be here to try to inspire others not to be so scared to jump into cybersecurity. And you'll definitely be able to tell from my background that it was definitely a big change, and but it's definitely doable.
So true. Chantel, if you're okay, I was gonna say I will bring up your slides. Looks like Rihanna's on top of it for me. Um, and with no further ado, I will back out and let you have the floor,
All right,
ma'am.
thank you. All right, hi everyone, and thank you for being here today. Again, my name is Shantel Robeaux, and I currently work as a compliance analyst at Summit 7, supporting organizations with CMMC readiness and compliance efforts within the defense industrial base. Today, I want to share my journey into cybersecurity. As you hear, my path is definitely not traditional. Before entering cybersecurity, I spent over 20 years owning and operating a business in the performing arts industry. And if you would have told me years ago that I would eventually be working in cybersecurity compliance and speaking at a cybersecurity conference, I honestly would not have believed you. And then one of the biggest things that I hope people take away from this session is that there is no single path into cybersecurity. I did hear that pretty early on in my journey, and I definitely back that up now. And then sometimes the experiences that make us feel most different are actually the things that become our greatest strengths. All right, next slide, please. All right, my background before cybersecurity. So before transitioning into cybersecurity, I did spend over 2 decades running a business in the performing arts industry, specifically a dance studio. And this is a picture of me on my last rehearsal, where we put on an annual production for over 1,000 guests. So yes, I put on 20 plus years of annual recitals, and this was my last one. Like many business owners, I handled a little bit of everything. I managed employees, scheduling, customer relationships, training, operations, finances, communication, and problem solving every single day, and taking out the trash when needed. At the time, I didn't think about my experiences with cybersecurity related skills I assumed cybersecurity was only about the technical things that I did, like identity and access management, connecting our computers, printers, and managing our key fob access system. But now looking back, many of these skills I did develop actually did directly transition over to compliance and governance work. Things like communication, organization, accountability, documentation, leadership, risk management, training people, and learning how to solve problems really quickly. So cybersecurity, especially compliance, is about much more than technology alone. It also requires people skills, operational thinking, and the ability to communicate clearly across these different teams and organizations that you have. And then one example that really changed how I view transferable skills happened during a production rehearsal. Years ago, we would have rehearsal the morning of our show. And a few hours before the show, we discovered that about 50 front row seats had been sold that didn't actually exist because the ticketing company was still using an old seating layout. So obviously that could have become a very stressful situation very quickly because families were arriving in just a few hours expecting those front row seats. But one thing running a business taught me was to always prepare for the unexpected issues. I had already learned over the years that something unusual comes up during large productions. So I always tried to build backup plans into our processes. And because of that, I had several excellent seats intentionally kept on hold for emergencies and last minute issues. And I was able to hand off rehearsal responsibilities to my assistant so the production could and practice could continue running smoothly while I focused on solving this issue. And then I personally called every affected family, explained the situation honestly, reassured them, and let them know that their new seats were actually even better than the original ones they purchased. And then thankfully, everyone was incredibly understanding. And at the time, I just thought that I was just handling a regular recital issue in customer service. But now looking back, that situation involved problem solving, communication, risk management, contingency planning, leadership, and staying calm under pressure. And those are the skills I now use regularly in cybersecurity, compliance, and governance work. All right, next slide. So I get asked a lot why I decided to change careers. And there came a point in a time that I wanted a new challenge professionally and personally. So I had to figure out my new path. I have always been interested in technology, and then over the years, I have kept up with new technology that helped improve productivity and keeping customer data safe, and ways to make the customer experience more enjoyable. And the cybersecurity field felt like the right step in my journey. So making a career change later in life was definitely intimidating, and some people thought I was crazy. I think many people entering cybersecurity feel overwhelmed because the industry can seem extremely technical and fast moving. And I dealt with a lot of self-doubt in the beginning, and I questioned whether I was too far behind, whether I really could succeed in this field, and whether people would take me seriously coming from such a different background. But I didn't sit in that space for long. I witnessed other people in different industries making career changes. We always need a different view on things. And some of these professions that people would change careers from were nurses. I even came across a hairstylist and teachers jumping into cybersecurity. And eventually I realized something that was very important, and that cybersecurity is a very broad industry, and not every role requires that exact same skill set. And there are many ways to contribute and many different strengths that organizations need. And then once I started asking myself, how can my background actually add value to cybersecurity? My mindset changed, and I realized that I didn't need to fit a specific mold to be successful. I became much more focused on learning, and that's when I really committed to going back to school, earning many certifications, and investing in myself. All right, next slide. That's when I enter my learning phase. So I'm a planner at heart. So when I decided to pursue cybersecurity, I didn't immediately enroll in college. I wanted to make sure this was something I was genuinely interested in before making that commitment. And I know college isn't for everyone, and I had to figure out if that was the path that I was going to take. So I started with a few Google IT and cybersecurity classes. And my thought was that I wanted to let's see if I actually enjoy learning this before jumping in with both feet. And well, I did. In fact, the more I learned, the more curious I became. And then that curiosity is what led me to research different schools. And I wanted a program that would let me work at my own pace, fit around my schedule, and include industry recognized certifications along the way, since I knew they were so important. And that ended up being exactly what I needed. And I'm not going to lie, though, some of those certifications and classes were intimidating. Pen Test Plus scared me to death, but I knew that was a little down the road. So I was going to concentrate on what was in front of me. And there were plenty of times I looked at the material and thought, how am I ever going to learn all this? And cybersecurity can feel like you're learning a completely new language. There are acronyms everywhere and new technologies, new frameworks, and concepts you've probably never heard of before. But something interesting happened. And instead of focusing on everything I didn't know, I started focusing on what I learned each day. And that shift made a huge difference as well. One thing I learned very quickly is that consistency does matter more than perfection. I wasn't trying to master cybersecurity overnight, even though I felt like that's what I was trying to do. I was simply trying to be a little better today than I was yesterday. So I developed a routine. I spent a lot of time studying, taking notes, listening to podcasts, networking, joining online communities, and just simply asking questions. I also learned not to be afraid to say I don't understand. And every time I asked a question, I learned something new. And every small win gave me a little more confidence. And eventually, I stopped measuring my progress by how much I still had left to learn. And instead, I started looking back and realizing how far I actually came in such a short period of time. And that mindset completely changed the way I approach learning. I also learned that you do not need to know everything before you get started, even though you kind of feel like you want to do that. I think sometimes people wait until they feel fully prepared. But in cybersecurity, learning never really stops. So you're never fully prepared. No matter how experienced someone is, there's always another technology, another framework, another certification, or another lesson waiting for them. And then continuous learning is actually one of the reasons why I fell in love with this field. And I did the same thing when I had my business. I loved learning and was always interested in learning more. And it keeps me curious, it keeps me challenged, and it reminds me that growth is a lifelong process. Now, looking back, I think the biggest lesson from this phase wasn't learning cybersecurity. It was learning how to learn and what worked best for me. And then that lesson has probably been just as valuable as any certification that I earned. All right, next slide, please. All right, now my first IT job after switching fields. After completing some coursework and certifications, I knew I was ready to start looking for that first IT job. And at first, I was applying for cybersecurity roles, many cybersecurity roles, because that's where I ultimately wanted to end up. But after doing more research and talking with people already working in the industry, I realized I needed to think differently. And I came to the conclusion that I didn't need to land my dream job first, and I needed to land a job that would help me build experience. And that's when I shifted my focus to service desk and help desk roles. I started researching companies I wanted to work for. I tailored my resume, applied for positions, and even reached out to people in talent acquisition and recruiting. And I wanted to do more than just submit an application and hope someone noticed me, because I knew that it was hard to get noticed in a sea of applications. Eventually, the persistence did pay off, and I accepted my first IT position supporting the U.S. Marshal Service as a contractor. And this wasn't my first experience with technology. As a business owner, I had already handled many technology-related responsibilities, like managing user accounts, troubleshooting computers, supporting the endless printer issues, and overseeing our key fob access system. But this was my first opportunity to work in a dedicated IT role within a larger organization and in the government space. It was exciting to finally see concepts I had learned through school and certifications being used in this real world government environment. And I was working with user accounts, access requests, password resets, software issues, installing software, and technologies that I had previously only studied. And then every day I was learning something new, and it was exciting. One thing I quickly realized was that certifications and coursework provide a great foundation, but there is still no substitute for hands-on experience. The more tickets I worked and the more situations I countered, the more my confidence grew. And I wasn't trying, as I said earlier, I wasn't trying to know everything. I was just simply focused on learning something new every day. And then looking back, that role was an important step in my journey because it helped bridge that gap between the learning cybersecurity concepts and actually working in the technology environment. It also enforced something I still believe today. Sometimes the fastest way to reach your long-term goal isn't by trying to skip ahead. It's really by willing to take that first opportunity, gain experience, and continue building from there. And for me, that service desk role became the foundation for everything that came next. All right, next slide, please. Now we get into discovering the CMMC and compliance. And as I gained more experience, I also started thinking about where I wanted to go within cybersecurity. It's such a broad field. I began exploring different areas of the field and eventually discovered compliance and CMMC. And as I continued learning about cybersecurity, I was introduced to obviously governance, risk, and compliance, as we say GRC, and eventually to CMMC. And for anyone unfamiliar with CMMC, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification, it's a framework designed to help organizations within the defense industrial base, and it has you protect their sensitive information, including controlled unclassified information, as we call it CUI. And at first, I was simply trying to just understand what CMMC was and why organizations were spending so much time preparing for it. But the more I learned, the more interested I became. What really interested me about this space was that it combined technology with communication, documentation, process improvement, and operational accountability. And I really realized quickly that compliance work was not only about the technical issues, it was also about helping organizations build sustainable security practices and improve them over time. And then that really connected with my backgrounds and strengths, a huge part of what I used to do. As a business owner, I spent over years building processes, documenting procedures, training people, and making sure everyone understood their roles and responsibilities. And the more I learned about compliance, the more I realized that I have been using many of these same skills for years, just in a completely different industry. Another thing I appreciated was that compliance work gives you the opportunity to work with people across an entire organization. And you're not only thinking about the technology, you're thinking about their operations, communication, training, accountability, and how everything works together. And then I also appreciated that this work was a real world impact because organizations are helping protect sensitive information and support our nation's defense. Having a job that had a little more meaning behind it was important to me. The work I used to do before had a great impact on me, and I knew it made a difference in the world. And so having my next field have that same impact was important to me. My husband served in the military for over 20 years, so this mission behind the Defense Industrial Base was something I could personally connect with. And then knowing that this work helps support organizations that contribute to our national security, it really made even more appealing to me. And then at that point, I realized this wasn't just another area of cybersecurity that interests me. This was a direction I really wanted to pursue professionally. And then once I decided this was an area I wanted to pursue, I really wanted to understand how I could make that work and understand the framework as deeply as possible. And then that led me to pursue my certified CMMC professional, known as CCP certification, and then later also my certified CMMC assessor, known as CCA. And I spent a lot of time learning everything I could about CMMC, the assessment process, and what organizations need to do to prepare for it. And the deeper I got into the framework, the more I enjoyed it. I enjoyed understanding how requirements connected together and how organizations could build those processes that supported the long-term success. And this led me to getting hired at Summit 7 as a compliance analyst. All right, next slide. Now, why compliance and governance at Summit 7 became a good fit. Before I ever worked at Summit 7, I was trying to learn as much as I could about CMMC. And then one of the resources that I kept coming back to was actually the Summit 7 podcast. I could tell right away that they were definitely the experts in the area. And as someone who was new to CMMC, I appreciated that the conversations wasn't just about checking the compliance boxes. They spent time explaining why the frameworks exist, how it evolved, and where it's headed, and what organizations need to think about beyond simply passing an assessment. And it made a complicated topic feel much more understandable. And the more I listened, the more I realized that this was the type of work I really wanted to be involved in. And I remember thinking I would love the opportunity to work for a company like this someday. And that eventually became a reality when I joined Summit 7 as a compliance analyst. And since joining the team, I've had the opportunity to support organizations working towards CMMC readiness within the defense industrial base. And then one thing that has been especially valuable is gaining exposure to real-world readiness efforts and seeing how these organizations approach cybersecurity, maturity, and compliance. And then what really stood out to me is, again, how much cybersecurity compliance depends on, again, communication, documentation, process, accountability, and collaboration. And then technology is obviously important, but successful compliance efforts also require people working together across the organization. And I've also appreciated seeing organizations at different stages of their compliance journey and understanding the unique challenges each one faces. Some organizations are just beginning to understand what CMMC means for them, and while others are much further along in their journey. And I've also had the opportunity to see how experienced consultants, assessors, engineers, and compliance professionals all work together to help organizations prepare for their certification. And being surrounded by people with that level of expertise has accelerated my own learning in ways that I couldn't have accomplished on my own. And then one thing that I've learned is that organizations that are who are successful usually treat compliance as an ongoing business process rather than a one-time project. This is continually to improve your systems. The approach is something Summit 7 emphasizes, and after working with clients, I understand why. Organizations that view compliance as part of their everyday operations are much better prepared for those who see it as something they only think about right before an assessment. I think that perspective has really reinforced the idea that cybersecurity is not only about tools and technology. It's about the people, the processes, communication, and continuous improvement. All right, next slide. All right, what I see organizations commonly that they struggle with. As I gained more experience working with organizations, I started noticing a pattern. No matter the size of the organization or where they were in their compliance journey, many of them were running into similar roadblocks. And while technology certainly plays an important role, I found that many of these challenges also involved communication, documentation, process, and ensuring everyone understood their responsibilities. One thing I learned through the compliance and readiness work is that organizations often struggle with many of these same challenges. And some of the common areas are confusion around system scoping. They're not sure what's in their environment. They are not fully understanding where the CUI exists and how to protect it. Documentation is not matching the actual practices and inconsistent processes, and understanding the importance of evidence and user awareness. A lot of organizations initially think compliance is only a technical problem, but in reality, cybersecurity compliance involves the entire organization. It it really requires leadership support, communication, training, accountability, and continuous improvement for it to be successful. And then one thing Summit 7 often emphasizes is that compliance is not simply a checklist. It's an ongoing operational mindset. And then organizations that approach compliance as a long-term operational commitment, they tend to be much more successful. Now, after speaking about the compliance, I'd like to shift gears for a minute and then talk about something that had a huge impact on my own journey into cybersecurity. And while I was going through school and earning certifications, I also started investing time into LinkedIn. All right, next slide, please. All right, the power of networking in LinkedIn. I wanted to learn from people who are already doing the jobs that I hope to do in one day. LinkedIn was not something that I dabbled in until I decided to change careers. It just wasn't the path that had to do with my business. So I know I needed to find the platform that matched the field that I was going into. That was LinkedIn. I started following cybersecurity professionals, connecting with the people in the industry, and paying attention to the conversations happening and around cybersecurity and compliance. And then what started as a learning tool eventually became one of the most valuable parts of my career journey. And one thing that had a much bigger impact on my career than I ever expected was LinkedIn. When I first started my cybersecurity journey, I wasn't using LinkedIn before. I was actually just using it to look for a job. And I started following cybersecurity professionals, reading their posts, and they're asking questions, and paying attention to the conversations happening in the industry, and learning how to talk the talk. One thing I quickly noticed was that many of the people sharing their stories had backgrounds that looked a lot like mine. They came from different industries. They weren't all coming from the traditional IT careers. And then that gave me confidence and helped me see what was possible. And then over time, I became more active. I started connecting with people, sharing parts of my own journey, and engaging with others in the cybersecurity community. And what surprised me is how willing people were to share advice, answer questions, and encourage others. And then looking back, LinkedIn had become much more than a social media platform. It became a place to learn, build these relationships, and become part of a cybersecurity community. Many of the opportunities I've had, including professional connections, podcast appearances, and speaking opportunities, can be traced back to the relationships that I started through networking and being active on LinkedIn. And this includes obtaining my job with Summit 7. For anyone considering a career change, I would encourage you to spend time connecting with people in the area of cybersecurity that interests you. You can learn actually a tremendous amount by simply just listening, engaging, and just building these relationships. All right, next slide. So I hit many milestones along the way. When people look at someone's career transition, they often only see where they ended up. What they don't always see are all the small steps that happen along the way. And then for me, this wasn't just one big decision. It was a series of smaller decisions that built on each other over time. It started with just taking a few classes to see if cybersecurity was something I truly enjoyed. Then came all the certifications. And then every certification taught me something different and helped me build my confidence. And then eventually I earned my first IT role supporting the U.S. Marshals Service. And that experience allowed me to apply what I had learned in real world experience environments, and it showed me what I could do to succeed in a technical role. And then along the way, I completed my bachelor's degree in cybersecurity, and then later my master's degree in cybersecurity. And then I also pursued my certifications focused on the CMMC ecosystem, including the CCP and CCA, because I wanted to better understand the framework and how organizations prepare for assessments. And then each milestone felt significant at the time, but looking back, no single milestone changed everything. It was a combination of continuous learning, experience, and persistence that created momentum. Eventually, that path led me to Summit 7 and the work that I do today that I thoroughly enjoy. Looking back, I'm grateful that I focused on taking the next step instead of worrying about the entire journey, because I probably would have been completely overwhelmed. Next slide, please. And then what made the biggest difference? When people ask me how I made this transition, they sometimes expect there to be a secret formula. And the truth is that I had to figure it out along the way. There's a few simple things that did make the biggest difference. And the first was consistency. I wasn't studying 8 hours a day. I wasn't trying to learn everything all at once. I simply committed to making progress on a regular basis. If I was working on my A+ certification, that's where my focus was. Then my next focus was studying for my Network Plus and so on. And so between my school and my certifications, it's just taking one thing at a time. And then the second thing was asking questions. There were many times when I didn't understand something. Instead of pretending I knew the answer, I asked questions and learned from people who had more experience. And then the third was absolutely networking. Building these relationships through LinkedIn and the cybersecurity community opened doors that I never expected. That's one thing I didn't think that I figured it was going to be hard, because I had a community with owning my business. I had a large community that I built up over the years, and it took some time to build that community. But I really made a lot of progress in a short period of time in cybersecurity. And then also the fourth was definitely hands-on experience. The certifications and degrees provided a strong foundation, but applying that knowledge in real-world environments accelerated the growth. And then finally, staying curious. Cybersecurity changes constantly. There's always something new to learn. I think that curiosity has been one of the most important factors in helping me continue to move forward. All right, next slide. Now, all this sounds great, but things that didn't go as planned. There's always things that come up. I think it's important to be honest about something. Career transitions rarely happen exactly the way you imagine they will. You could get all the certifications and you could just feel like you're applying to endless amounts of jobs and just not getting hired. And I've been there. There were also certifications that took way more effort than I expected. Like I mentioned earlier, it was like learning a new language, and sometimes it could seem really intimidating, and you question every decision you made to get into this field. And there were many concepts that didn't click immediately. And also there were times when I wondered if I was moving fast enough. And there were moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. What I've learned is that growth is often happening even when you don't immediately see the results. And you might feel like you're in the same spot, but when you really focus on what's important, when you look back, you realize that you were actually growing. And now looking back, some of the moments that felt frustrating at the time were actually helping me prepare for future opportunities. Confidence didn't come from passing one certification or landing one job. Confidence came from repeatedly showing up, learning, and proving to myself that I could handle the next challenge. And then sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to have everything figured out. But reality is most successful career transitions happen one step at a time. All right, next slide. All right, now what success looks like for me now? Earlier in my journey, success looked like passing certifications or landing a role in cybersecurity. But today, success looks very different. What it means to me now is continuing to grow, helping organizations improve, and supporting others entering into cybersecurity, and continuing to learn every day. I've also learned that success does not always follow that straight line. Sometimes the unexpected path becomes the right path. All right, next slide. And then encouragement for career changers. A few years ago, I was running a performing arts business and wondering if I could successfully transition into any field, much less into cybersecurity. Now, today, I've completed 2 cybersecurity degrees, earned multiple certifications, worked in IT, joined Summit 7, appeared in podcasts, and have the opportunity to speak at conferences like this one. And none of that happened overnight. It happened one step at a time. And honestly, that's why I wanted to share my story for today. Not because my path was perfect, but because it proves that career transitions are actually possible. All right, next slide. Now, if there's one thing that I hope you remember is that like I said, there's no single path into cybersecurity. There's no right path into cybersecurity. Your previous experience does matter. And the most important thing is that you keep learning and you keep growing, and don't be afraid to take the first step. Thank you all for allowing me to share my journey with you today. And thank you for listening to my story. All right.
Amazing, Chantal. That was
A lot,
great to
huh?
hear your story and how you were able to pivot careers and progress and become a leader in this with some steps that were very clear, very straightforward, and I think could be implemented by anyone who's willing to take that step and go with it. Um, this Mike said it well here. The honesty. Not many people talk about the messy path, but that's the reality. Success isn't a straight line. I agree
Absolutely.
with Mike. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have believed that I would be doing this, but you never know where life takes you. And you just got to go for it.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, frankly, it makes me wonder, are there things from your past of working with a- performers and, you know, getting out there, doing the thing that they love, doing the thing that they feel called to, um, and just having been part of that for so long,
Mhm.
was that, I don't know, possibly in a way, you hearing yourself in a new context?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously teaching was a huge part of my experience. And it was the just being disciplined. Discipline was such a huge part. And I was always preaching to my students on just being committed to what you have on your plan. Whatever
Mhm.
your plan is, just being committed to it is such a huge step. Because sometimes people just, I'm going to just dabble in this and dabble in that and things. And it's great if you're trying to figure it out. There's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with that. But once you have to own something and you have to put your full attention into something to really see the growth happen. And that's, we would tell our students that we would much rather you take one class
Mhm.
and attend that class every single week and be completely focused on that one class as opposed to taking 5 classes that you're a little spread out over. And that's pretty much my approach to when I was in school or studying for a certification. I'm still studying for certifications. It's
Mhm.
just always a thing. It's just picking something and being committed to it and just following through with it.
That's huge. That's huge. There are a lot of things that we might do in life that are professions for others and hobbies for most, and the difference between them is showing up regularly and making it your life, right? I
Absolutely.
feel like I sing fairly decently, but that's not going to be my job because I
Yes,
don't devote my time to it like a professional would.
absolutely.
Choices.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even in the sports industry, it's the same sort of thing. We see, someone might watch a game and not realize what that athlete has put in
Hmm.
to get to where they are today. That's really not spoken enough about is the journey that it takes to get there. Through my career, there's many parties I didn't go to. There's many things that I didn't, but it was just my choice. It was my choice to focus on something else. And it's just a choice that you have to make to put in the time.
And your story reflects many I've heard of taking the time to devote to learning cybersecurity, to learning the ins and outs and some of the specialties. Getting certified in as a CCP for CMMC is not a small thing. I have the courseware myself. Um, I am wondering if I want to spend the time on it right now or wait a few months and see what the DOW decides. But overall, it's not bad to become knowledgeable in risk management altogether, even if it's depending on the niche. Um, one framework does help with other frameworks. Um, the uh, the target for all of our fundraising today is Next Gen Cyber Ed, which has a platform and a mission for helping K through 12 learn some of the skills in cyber. I know you, I could imagine, I've got daughters 11 and 8 who have been dancing and singing and performing through different schools over the years. Having not done my full intel on your background, my full OSINT, I don't know which exact flavor you were in previously, but I imagine that you worked with all different age groups, and knowing what it takes in some of those skills to have a career, and knowing what it takes in cyber to have a career, what does an organization like Next Gen Cyber Ed mean to you?
It definitely means a lot to me. I did teach children from ages 2 through adult. Um, Part of what I did is I had a leadership program that we didn't dance in our leadership program. It was all about working on their soft skills and just in general having a mentor there to help guide them through um, things that aren't taught in school. And so a part of that was always, again, focusing a little off of dance, but having that opportunity, I knew that I was an influence on them and I could show them a positive way to move through life. And again, focus on picking something, learning all you can. Um, and then also, you might, I mean, and it's funny that I say this, but I mean, I remember sitting with my students and having that conversation that you might go to school and you might become, you might go into cybersecurity, and then 10 years down the road, you might decide, no, I want to do something different. And that is okay. You don't have to choose when you're a young student. You don't have to choose something that you're going to do for the rest of your life. Just choose something for right now. Find a path to go through right now. And I think with students and cybersecurity, I just think in general, even if they don't decide to do it as a career, I think it's just great for them to know the information, protect their own self, their own families eventually in this technology world. So I just think it's a real important thing for our students to know.
I love that. As someone who, former pilot, devoted many, many, many years of my life to a exact practice, and then no longer do that in any way whatsoever. I cannot disagree with you.
Yeah,
I cannot agree more strongly with what you just said. Making a change is not impossible, and it's crazy what carryovers you will find from one area to another that can be so valuable.
absolutely. I mean, just soft skills is such a huge part of what we do, and I don't think enough focus is on that. So I think that's definitely something that our young students need more help with as well, and especially in cybersecurity, having to talk about the technical controls to the CEO of the company, and get them to understand. That's a skill that I feel like our young students need help with as well. Just being able to communicate technically what something, a framework is, to someone who doesn't understand. When I was going to school, I would always practice, obviously, on my family and practicing explaining things to my mom, and trying to, talk about these technical skills, but get it to where they can understand it. And then the same sort of thing that students could practice with as well. They could practice with their family members as well.
I love that. I love that. I'm looking to see, we've got some comments, friends who love what you've said. At times, if you didn't see the chat, Mike has been a fan of you highly. Same as Brown Coyote, and there it is. I was curious. Chantel, Rihanna dropped this. I think for possibly others in the audience, but what made you start to make the change into cyber from performing arts?
Like I mentioned, I really was into IT. So everything, I was always on top of technology. And my husband actually was an Intel analyst before he retired from the military. And, as talking about career paths and everything, we just, he's like, hey, I think you should check out cybersecurity. He knew I would do my research because, like I told you before, I'm a planner. So like I have to plan everything out and get in the weeds of everything and do all my research. And it just seemed right. Everything else that I would look at, I would always have another reason why, I didn't want to go into this or I didn't want to go into that. And I just kept going back to cybersecurity every single time. I loved IT, but it was just another position.
Yeah.
And it was just the next step I found. However, I definitely think that you really need to have a real basic knowledge of IT. Obviously, that's, why I decided to work in the service desk role.
Mm-hmm.
Where I came from in dance, it's so important to know the basics. Network Plus, it was a frustrating certification, but it was such an important class. It was such an important certification. And it's all about knowing those basics. So yeah, I think that in cybersecurity, you might not be doing that every day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get and configure things every day, but it's so helpful when you have that understanding of it and what baselines people are putting in place and understanding those things. Like it totally, you can listen to these conversations and understand what they're talking about. But
It's so
I'm
true.
not writing a Python script. Even though I took the Python class, I'm not writing the Python script.
That's very, very, very true. I like a course like and certification course like Network Plus or Security Plus for that, to really dive in, dedicate to learning the language, learning the lingo, learning the mindset. And then what you do won't necessarily be a one-to-one, learn this, doing it exactly. It's not, cyber's not exactly like that. But now that you're there, learning the nuance, learning the specifics of something that really interests you, like frameworks and CMMC, um, versus Python scripts and using that for enumeration and exploit development is different.
Mhm.
But you can have a conversation at least at some level about each because of the foundation that you've built.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I like CMMC is I really enjoy digging into the documentation and making sure that your employees are following what's in your documentation, not just that it's documented, following through. So that goes with your learning environment and educating the staff that you have. And then also, your baseline configurations on your printer or your baseline configurations on this endpoint that you have. So it combines all of these items to make a full picture of your environment.
Yeah, it's huge. And You hit it right on the nose. Um, are there any additional parting thoughts that you would like to leave folks with today?
I think that I think what I would like to make sure that everyone understands that to be good with your own journey. Everyone has a different path of getting into cybersecurity, and I had my framework that I came up with, but it's different for everyone, and that's one thing I had to learn early on as well. As you're reading everyone's stories on how they got into cybersecurity, you have to take what your background is and fix it to align with what works for you. So even though you might be going into a new career path, make sure to take a look back at the things that you've done and see how they transfer over. And even though I wanted a different career, there was many parts of what I used to do that I still enjoyed, that I didn't realize that I was going to be able to still enjoy these things in the next field going into. So definitely take a look at what you've done before, see where you can be a benefit to in this cybersecurity field, and then lay out your own path. See what works for you.
Love that. Where is the best place for people to get in contact with you if they have more questions or they want to talk to you about um, cyber?
I'm active on LinkedIn, so I go there every day. Just send me a message. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. But definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I usually keep up with posting my journey. My journey hasn't ended. I'm still learning. I'm still studying for certifications. It's just part of what you do.
Do you have a hot take on the DOD's latest
Pause.
press release about CMMC?
Yes, it's
About
business
cooing?
as usual. It's business as usual. It's just right
It's not
now.
good.
It's just a pause on someone on having that C3PAO assess your environment right now. That's just paused. But other than that, everything's still in place. It's just business as usual, continuing to assess people's environments and
Hmm.
implement their cybersecurity because it's still a requirement. That hasn't changed.
Yeah,
So
the,
I heard someone say that just because the cop is away doesn't mean that you unlock the door, right?
very, very true.
So
Um,
you keep
171
going
has been a requirement for a long time.
for a very long time. Absolutely. So I would think as a past business owner, I think it would be a huge risk to decide not to continue to secure your systems.
Yeah, to be prepared for that C3PO, um, either getting it done because you know you can, and it's good to get a
Hmm.
good audit of we know we've prepared within either ourselves or with an organization, but
Yeah,
to have
having
someone
somebody
come
else
in and
look at
check,
it.
never a bad idea.
Absolutely. I mean, having someone else take a look at it, I think is a great thing. So yeah, I continue on, protect those systems.
I love it. Love it. Thank you, Chantal. It's great to get to chat with you here and hear your words. Really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having me, and thank you for doing it. I think it's a great cause to help these kids out.
Thanks.